There are many festivals in the course of the Jewish year, festivals and holidays, and I'm sure that you're aware that, you have the Shabbat every week, and many people have been to a Shabbat meal or Shabbat family, and there is Sukkot, the Sukkot, where you go into a sukkah and you celebrate, you have a meal there, and there is Rosh Hashanah, and there's Yom Kippur, and all of the festivals involve various rituals. The evening of the year that involves by far the most ritual, by a long shot, is clearly the Pesach Seder, the Passover Seder. So what we'd like to do today is to walk through anyone who is interested. Maybe you've never been to a Seder, or perhaps you have been to a Seder, if you wondered about some of the things that you've seen and did not have an opportunity to ask. So we're going to kind of step it through and go through the various rituals and what a Pesach Seder will look like for the most part. The word Seder, which means literally means an order, is because there is a certain prescribed set of rituals that we go through in a very specific order, and there are 15 steps at the Pesach Seder. Some count it as 14 steps, and we're going to try to walk it through. So, without any further ado, you're well aware that the first thing that takes place at a Shabbos meal, for example, is Kiddush. They make Kiddush at the meal. Kiddush is the declaration of allegiance to God, and we start every holiday meal with Kiddush. And the idea behind Kiddush, besides being the declaration of allegiance, is that it's the official starting point. There's no gnashing and there's no picking away at taking a wing and grabbing a piece of kugel. You have to wait until we are officially underway. So the Pesach Seder begins with Kaddish, which is where we make Kiddush at the Pesach Seder. Now, before I go on, you'll notice how busy this table looks. We have it's called the Seder tray, which has the morer and the shank bone and the charoses, and it's got the potato for dipping into the salt water, which I have over here, and we have the egg that some people use. And here is the Kiddush cup, here is the wine, here is the Haggadah, which is the word Haggadah, which literally means the telling over, and this is going to be the guide that you will see in any home that you go for the Pesach Seder. So let's go take a look at the first thing to do. Now, you just have to remember that the men, first of all, you'll notice that I am representing the leader of the Seder, and the leader of the Seder often wears what's called the kittel. The kittel is a white garment, otherwise known as shrouds, and it is worn traditionally by at a funeral. The male deceased is wrapped in a kittel, and the groom at the wedding also wears a kittel. Now, why the groom wears the kittel? We obviously doesn't feel he's going to his grave, but those are the two. The third time of the year that it's worn, it's also worn on Yom Kippur by many, and some men wear it on Rosh Hashanah, and it's also worn by the leader of the Seder at the Pesach Seder. One of the ideas is that it lends a certain seriousness to what it is that we're about to do. And therefore, that's the first thing. The second thing is, you'll notice there's a rule at the Seder that when certain of the mitzvos, certain of the rituals are performed, the men have to lean. The women do not lean. Leaning is a sign of royalty, and Jewish women do not have to lean at the Pesach Seder because we see all Jewish women as inherent royalty. They are queens, and therefore they don't have to lean. The men lean as a reminder, like so, or if you have a pillow, some men actually bring a couch, and when you eat or drink, you lean all the way over. Now, nowadays in the 21st century, it would be seen as somewhat uncomfortable, but in the old days, aristocracy and royalty did lean, and therefore to recapture that, that's what you're going to see us doing at the Pesach Seder. So, when you go into a home, the first thing it's going to be is Kaddish. They will fill the Kiddush cups with wine, preferably should drink red wine at the Pesach Seder. There are going to be 4 cups of wine that are drunk, minimum, and preferably it should be red wine. White wine is acceptable, but the custom is to drop in a few drops of red to try to get that red color. If a person does not feel well from the wine, or wine doesn't take well to wine, then it is permissible from the halachic point of view for a person to use grape juice. However, it is ideal to use red wine, and yes, in answer to your question, after 4 cups of wine, a person is pretty high. Actually, after 3 cups of wine, it's sometimes after 2 cups of wine. So I will not be drinking the wine literally, but The demonstration, we pour the wine and I have water in my cup, and I'm going to demonstrate this to you because I want to show you Jewish acrobatics. Because over here we make the Kiddush, and the Kiddush in certain homes you will be in, one person makes the Kiddush, just like on Friday night. In other homes they have a tradition where they go around the table and all the men at the table make their individual Kiddush. Now the Kiddush is printed in the Haggadah. I'm not going to go through the words of the Kiddush, but after the Kiddush is made, then there is a Borei Pri HaGefen made, and it begins with a Borei Pri HaGefen, and there is a Shechiyanu blessing. And after it is drunk, now I have water over here, so I will make a shahakol, so I could show you how, if this were wine, how it would be drunk. Now this is one of the more tricky, to negotiate this into one's mouth without spilling is very, very tricky. And frankly, there will be likely to be spilling. Don't feel self-conscious. Everybody is spilling at the Seder too. Don't do it intentionally. Don't spill on somebody else. But don't feel bad if it happens. So let's say I have made Kiddush, and after the Kiddush I say a Shechiyanu, and then I'm just making, this is not part of the Seder. And if this were Kiddush, what I would then do is lean, and I would drink like so. Very awkward. Now my head has to be on an angle to get that cup in, and if you instinctively tilt it, then you are going to spill. So we drink the cup, and it is ideal to drink the entire cup of wine. You don't have to have a big goblet. You'll notice these are pretty big goblets. You can use, the halachic minimum is 3.3 fluid ounces. There are a different range in halacha of how much it be, but ideally it should be better a smaller cup that fulfills the halachic requirement than a big cup if it's a question of drinking out the entire thing. So after we have what's called Kadesh, we make Kiddush, and then there is the next ritual, the next part of the Seder is what's called Urchatz. Now everybody knows that before you eat bread, you go to the sink and you take one of those big cups and you pour on each hand twice with the cup. And you make a bracha of Al Netilas Yadayim because you're about to eat bread. Here at the Pesach Seder, we do not do that. We wash at the Pesach Seder, we wash our hands, but we do not make a bracha. We do not make a bracha, and sometimes it gets confusing because people are so used to making bracha, sometimes they instinctively go to the sink and they will go making Al Netilas Yadayim, which brings certain halachic complications. Here, we are washing our hands without a bracha. And the reason for that is because the next step, step 3, is called karpas, which is an appetizer. And what we're going to do with the karpas is we take a piece of either potato, or it could be a piece, some people use celery, some people use carrots, and we dip it into the salt water. Now, anytime a Jew eats either fruit or even cake that is dipped into liquid, the letter of halacha says they have to wash their hands. If it is wet, they have to wash their hands beforehand without a bracha. And therefore, at this point of the Seder, they will announce it. Now, in some homes, you will find that they'll actually sing it. Kadesh Urchatz, almost as an announcement before each stage of the Seder. There are many different customs and many different minhagim at the Seder, many different ideas of how to conduct the Seder, and we'll talk about some of those ideas soon. We do not eat more than a kezayis. A kezayis is the size of an olive from the Talmudic times, which nowadays is estimated to be about 30 grams. It's not a lot, because eating more than that creates further halachic questions about having to make an after bracha. We take the karpas, and you dip it in salt water, and then you make the bracha. Some people make the bracha together at the table. Some people make the brachas individually. And we eat the karpas appetizer. We make a borei pri ha'adama, baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'adama, and then we take a bite of the karpas. There are those who lean while they're eating the karpas as well. There are those who do not lean when they're eating the karpas. If you did not lean, by the way, when you're drinking the wine, if a man does not lean when he's drinking wine, he has to drink the cup again. He has to drink it again. Now, some people probably do it intentionally, so they get a second cup of wine. But don't worry, you have plenty of wine in the course of the evening. You don't have to do it. You have to resort to any trickery. So you eat the karpas, And the karpas is then followed. The karpas is officially an appetizer. The reason we eat this sort of appetizer dipped, even though in the course of the year we don't normally necessarily do that, is again to demonstrate that we are free, we are aristocrats, and in stylistic areas, aristocrats in very upscale restaurants perhaps, aristocrats will eat with something that's dipped into a liquid, therefore symbolic of our aristocracy, we dip in the liquid. So that is where we begin with, we go to the karpas. Now, the idea is very, very strange that the karpas is then followed by a rather long wait until the main course comes out, and that's actually symbolic of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, came to the Jewish people and he purported that he was the Redeemer, but then he left for a while in order for the Jewish people to become more enthusiastic about grip the reality that they're going to be leaving Egypt. And then Moshe Rabbeinu came back 6 months later to actually take them out. And therefore, symbolically, the karpas is the appetizer, which represents Moshe Rabbeinu's first arrival. It arouses our appetite. And then the food, which is at the Pesach Seder, and is about the only thing that does not have a prescribed halachic ruling on what kind of food it is. Certain limitations, it cannot be chametz, but it doesn't, you don't have to necessarily eat chicken, you don't necessarily have to eat the meat or the potatoes or the carrots or whatever it is that's served, or the soup, or the matzah, whatever it is that's served. On the other hand, the food, we're pretty hungry by the time we get to the food, that food represents Moshe Rabbeinu coming back to bring about the ultimate redemption. So there's nothing that's done at the Pesach Seder which is without some sort of symbolism. So we finish with the karpas, and then we go to yachatz. Yachatz is the fourth stage of the Haggadah, and the yachatz, what we do is we have the matzah plate that I have over here, and the main matzah plate. Now, by the way, at most seders you will see that there are matzahs on the table, and there are other, but we have over here the matzah plate. And you notice that we have a beautiful covering over here that says matzah on it. You'll see very, very elaborate tableware at the Seder. People pull out all the stops for the Pesach Seder to make it look as respectful and honorable as possible. And we take the matzah over here. These are 3 matzahs. And yachatz is that we take the middle matzah of the 3, and then we break the middle matzah in half. Now, so here I have the middle matzah, and we break the middle matzah, and hopefully this is actually a little softer than matzah would normally be. Now, you'll notice which is the bigger piece. Well, obviously this one. The smaller piece goes underneath, back between the other 2 whole matzahs, and this matzah is then set aside, put away for later on for afikomen, which is actually the dessert of the Seder. It's a dessert of matzah, so don't get excited, but it is symbolically the dessert. Now we take this afikomen, and often it's hidden, because then you will notice there's then a game that's played where the kids go and look to, quote-unquote, steal the afikomen. And eventually, towards the end of the Seder, the kids, when the father wants the afikomen back, he asks the kids for the afikomen, and there's a negotiating session where the kid asks for something, and the father says, okay, in exchange for the afikomen, I'll give you what you were asking for, which is there are probably a lot of bicycles bought right around Pesach time, bicycles and various forms of toys and equipment. Make sure, if you're a kid watching this, that you don't overshoot, because if you ask for a car, your father's like to say, just give me the afikomen, kid, because he's not going to want to buy you a car. But, keep it within a reasonable negotiating range. And the idea here is already, the idea of setting it aside is in order to keep the kids motivated and awake. And that is going to be one of the themes of the Seder. The theme of the Seder is the telling over of the story of the Exodus, how we got out of Egypt. And the main players at this table are the kids. It's supposed to be the focus of attention is a father or a grandfather transmitting the Jewish tradition to his children or grandchildren. And not only that, sometimes people will do strange things at the table in order to arouse the kids' curiosity. So you'll have somebody who may take a pillow and also go like that. And the kid says, Daddy, why did you do that? I'm glad you asked, because we got out of Egypt 3,000 years ago. Or somebody will pick up the Seder tray, this is called the Seder tray, and actually get up and walk around the table with it. And somebody says, hey, why did you just do that? The kid's like, well, Daddy, why did you do that? We resort to any and all tactics in order to arouse the kids' interest and curiosity so that we can then transmit the values that are so fundamental to us, getting out of Egypt, God's supervision, God's intervention in the mankind's affairs, and so on and so forth. So anything that works. I know of people at the Pesach Seder, sometimes somebody will make a sound, or somebody will get up and spin around or dance around the table, because well, why are you doing that? You know, and the wife says, well, he has been strange for a long time, but the kid says, no, this is just part of the part. And the kid asks the question, and then problem is that I've been at Seders where somebody does something strange, and the kids just look, and suddenly one of the adults says, hey, why did you do that? But the ones that we're really supposed to be focused on is the children. So that is the yachatz, the breaking of the middle matzah. And then we get to Magid. Now, Magid means the telling over, and this is where we're going to use the Haggadah, and the Haggadah is a set liturgy where we go through paragraph after paragraph reading it, and what you will find in some Seders, we'll read the paragraph, everybody has to read the paragraph. Sometimes there will be elaboration, discussion, explanation, a story might be told, a discussion, analysis. It depends on the Seder. Some Seders will move rather quickly because people want to get through the actions of the Seder. Other Seders, if there is enough interest, then there will be a longer discussion. If you're a guest at a Seder, feel free to ask any questions that you'd like to ask. If there's something that you don't understand, if you'd like to contribute an idea, perhaps an original thought, you have to feel free to do that. So we start with Magid, and the first step in Magid, which is going to have quite a bit of time spent on it, is the Manishtana. The Manishtana, the words Manishtana means how is it different? Everybody is familiar with the expression, how is this night different than all other nights? And it comes from the Pesach Haggadah. And the Manishtana is where the child, usually the youngest child in the room, some people take turns, all the children, if they're really little, they may stand up on a chair, and the grandparents beam as their grandchild, gets a Manishtana Laila, so whether he's in tune or off tune, everybody just enjoys it. And they ask these 4 questions. And these 4 questions are the introduction. A question is asked when a person's mind is irritated. And the idea of the Pesach Seder is that the child should ask so that we can answer. When you ask, the answer will stay with you longer. If you just narrate to somebody, sometimes they're listening, half listening. But if you're curious about something and you ask a question, then the answer is going to have a much more long-lasting impact. So it starts with the Manishtana. And I would advise everybody in advance, anybody who's attending a Seder, that you should look over the Haggadah in advance. There are many Haggadahs that are printed with English commentary, so that you are aware of what it is that's happening at the Pesach Seder, what the story is about. If you have trouble reading Hebrew, you could read the story in English at the Pesach Seder. And again, feel free to participate, to ask questions, and if you have perhaps an original thought that you'd like to contribute, so if it's appropriate and you sense that it's appropriate time, feel free to do so. The next action part of the Magid section is towards the end of Magid, there will be a recital of the 10 plagues that took place in Egypt. And each time we get to those 10 plagues, we mention one of them. What we do is we either take our finger, some people use a spoon, ideally you take a finger, we have refilled, the wine cup has been refilled, and what we will do is Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, each one of the plagues, we spill out a little bit of wine from the wine cup. So if you see people all of a sudden sticking their pinky into the wine, don't be shocked. Eventually they'll refill it and they'll drink it. Just hope that they don't stick their pinky into your wine. And if they do, then you can stick your pinky into their wine and ask them how it feels. But I have never seen that really take place at a Pesach Seder. So the idea of we spill out a drop of wine at each one of the 10 plagues, there's also going to be a conjunction of the plagues. They're going to be condensing of the words, and again, there's going to be spilling out. But you'll see everybody doing that at the Pesach Seder. The wine cups will then be refilled, and as the Magid continues after the 10 plagues, that means we're getting closer to the actual eating at the Seder, and then there's going to be a declaration where Rabbi Gamliel says that there are three things that we should be looking at, and we must remind ourselves every Seder. Pesach, and we're going to point at a shank bone or a roasted piece of a roasted wing, symbolic of the Paschal lamb that was used on Pesach night, that was used in the Beis Hamikdash. Matzah, we point to the matzah. You see everybody pointing. Some people actually uncover it, and some people hold it up, and you point to the matzah. And then moror, and this is the moror. We point to the moror, which we will be getting to very soon. After that, we get to the second cup of wine, which is the end of the Magid section. And again, the second cup of wine, if you want grape juice by this point, because your head is a little bit light, you're lightheaded, you could change to grape juice. Ideally, it should be 4 cups of wine. And again, a bracha is made, and then we lean and drink. We lean and drink. And good luck. By that point, if you don't have anything on your shirt at all, I'd be very, very impressed. After the Magid, we then go to step 6 of the Seder night, and step 6 is called Rachza, which means the washing of the hands. There was Urchatz, which was the second step, where we washed the hands with a cup without a bracha. And now, since we are going to be eating bread, matzah, obviously, but matzah is in the category of bread that the bracha is hamotzi lechem min haaretz, we wash our hands again, and this time we do make a bracha of Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam al netilas yadayim. 1, 2 on the right hand, 1, 2 on the left hand, unless you're a lefty. If you're a lefty, you wash the other way. Then we go back to the Pesach Seder. After getting up and going to the kitchen to wash, some people actually bring a basin of water to the leader of the Seder, where he doesn't leave his seat because he represents the ultimate aristocrat, and he washes at his seat. And then we are ready for the matzah eating. Now, no talking, because we washed in the same way that you do not talk between washing al netilas yadayim and making hamotzi at a Shabbos meal or at any meal. We do not make any interruptions between the al netilas yadayim and the eating, consuming of the hamotzi, of the matzah. We then go to what's called motzi matzah. Motzi matzah is bringing out the matzah. There are those who actually count this as 2 separate steps. They have to say there's motzi matzah. Now, motzi matzah, which means bringing out the matzah, it also means making hamotzi on the matzah. The leader of the Seder then takes these 3 matzahs, it's actually 2.5 at this point, or 2 and change, picks them up, and he makes the bracha of hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Then he drops the 3rd matzah, the bottom matzah. Now he's only got the 1.5, and he makes a Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al achilas matzah, on the mitzvah of eating matzah. And then he breaks off some of the matzah, and he eats some of the matzah by himself. And again, he is leaning when he does this. He has to be leaning as he eats the matzah. After, he also breaks off some and hands some matzah to everybody sitting at the Pesach Seder. He hands out the matzah, takes his matzah, and leaves. Some people have pre-prepared matzahs by their plate. You'll see at the Seder that you attend how they arrange that. He then takes this matzah and leans, and you have to lean while you eat the matzah. a man has to lean. Some people lean very low. Some people lean a little higher like this at the table so that they're a little more comfortable. Whatever works, but it has to be leaning. If a person, we lean to the left, by the way. We do not lean to the right. We lean to the left because the covering over the trachea, the epiglottis, which is this thin membrane that covers the trachea, is slightly, it's behind and slightly to the right. And the person to the right, it could slip open and chas v'sholom, a person eating in that manner could choke. And therefore, we lean to the left, and this includes lefties. We lean to the left because this is a safety and health concern. Therefore, we lean to the left. After the matzah has been eaten, we then do another mitzvah. It's a night full of mitzvahs, and we go to the mitzvah of eating the moror. Now, the moror is the bitter herbs, which we take. The bitter herbs can either be romaine lettuce, or it can be ground horseradish. Ideally, should be romaine lettuce. The problem with romaine lettuce is that romaine lettuce is often infested with very, very difficult to spot bugs. They're camouflaged against romaine lettuce, and therefore many people, up until they figured out a way to grow vegetables in sand, then the infestation actually doesn't exist. There are some companies, there's called Bodake, where you can get romaine lettuce that will not have any bugs on it at all. The romaine lettuce that has bugs that is not from Bodake is very, very difficult to check for the bugs, and eating bugs is severely prohibited. The bugs can be on the leaves themselves, and even if you break it open and the stem is hollow in the stem over here. There are actually some people who check the romaine lettuce by using a sort of a X-ray machine where you lay the leaf down and it shines and you can see the bugs crawling around, but ideally that would be avoided. The horseradish, which is certainly a sharper taste, is not as ideal as romaine lettuce. Some people actually use both. They use the romaine lettuce and they use horseradish and they wrap it together. I've never done that, as evidenced by the fact that I'm here to speak about it. And they actually take, now the romaine lettuce, the reason, most people eat romaine lettuce, don't see it as bitter, it does have a subtle bitter aftertaste. And symbolically, the Egyptians, when they engaged the Jewish people in the hard labor, first they conned them into it. At the beginning, they actually paid them a little bit. And so it starts off sweet. The harsh labor of Avodas Perach started out sweet, but then they put them into harsh labor with a bitter aftertaste. Therefore, we eat the romaine lettuce. It's called moror, the bitter, as a way of reminding ourselves of that harsh, crushing labor that the Jewish people were engaged in while they were in Egypt. Now, the romaine lettuce is dipped in charoses. Charoses is a mix of, I have over here the charoses, if you can see it. It is a mix, various, with nuts and dates and ground apples, and a little bit of wine is poured in, walnuts. And then you dip the moror into the charoses, like so. Some people actually put on a lot of charoses. There is a halachic opinion you only put on a little bit of the charoses. The charoses represents the mortar that the Jewish people were using when they were building the pyramids or whatever they were building in Egypt. Definitely charoses definitely tastes a lot better than mortar. That's why we use charoses and not mortar. And the dip in the moror, and then you make a bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvosa v'tzivanu al achilas moror. And then you eat the moror. We do not lean when we eat the moror because the moror is a symbolic food. It's symbolic of the bitter herbs, and we eat the moror. There will be somebody to show you how much you have to eat to fulfill the minimal halachic obligation. It's usually about one medium-sized piece of moror does the trick. After we finish with the moror, we then go to what is arguably the difficult to understand ritual, and this is called korech. Now, korech really means to wrap. Ashkenazi matzahs are very, very hard and brittle. And, I made a calculation one year that the matzahs, they had 150 shekels a kilo, actually came out to 35 cents a bite. Probably why it's called poor man's bread by the time you get finished paying for it. And, you eat it and it's crumbling. And I remember one of my children once sitting, he was about 4 years old, and he was crumbling matzah. And I said, no, don't crumble it. Take mommy's jewelry. Do not crumble the matzah at the Seder at 35 cents a bite. And what we take is a piece of matzah. And then this piece of matzah, this is actually softer matzah because this is a Sephardi style matzah. We take a piece of moror and we put it inside the matzah and we recite, we are now eating a sandwich. Korech means to wrap. We take the matzah, we put a piece of romaine lettuce inside, and then we make a declaration. We're doing this to commemorate something that Hillel, the great sage Hillel, did at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, at the time of the temple. The only difference between us and him is that we have matzah and we have moror. Hillel at the time also had roast lamb because they offered the Paschal lamb as a sacrifice. Now that I could get used to. Have some roast meat, roast lamb, inside a laufa with some lettuce. I mean, that sounds pretty good. Here, it's matzah with romaine lettuce, and we eat this in commemoration of what Hillel did at the time of the Beis Hamikdash. That is called korech. And once we finish the korech, then, obviously, by this point, you're not as hungry as you were before. At this point, we get to shulchan orech, which means to set the table, the set table, which is when the food comes out, and there is a very elaborate meal that is served. You enjoy yourself. You realize you're an aristocrat. Some people actually, there are people who eat the meal, even the meal they eat while they're leaning. It's not obligated according by halacha, but there are certain men who do that as well. After you've eaten, you just have to pace yourself a little bit. There's going to be soup, and some people eat matzah balls with the soup, and they have then an appetizer and chicken and meat, and a delicious, delicious repast. You just have to pace yourself a little bit to leave room for one more eating, which is going to be the dessert, which is what we call the next step, which is step number 11 in the Seder, is tzafun. Tzafun, which means the hidden. And that's when we bring out the afikomen. Remember, we broke off that middle matzah. We bring out the afikomen, the tzafun. We bring out the afikomen, and the afikomen is then eaten as, quote unquote, dessert. So in case you can't get enough, and as a mitzvah, by the way, every bite of matzah is a mitzvah at the Pesach Seder. And there are people who actually eat matzah and eat very little at the meal because they want to be able to fill up on the matzah and do that mitzvah. Each person has to know themselves what they. There's no reason to not enjoy a nice meal. And then we take the afikomen. The afikomen is then broken. There's that negotiating session where the father tries to get it back from the son. Eventually he gets it, and he commits himself to a gift or two or three. Some families don't do that. Some families do not do the afikomen ritual. Either way, the matzah is then distributed to other people in the table. Everybody takes a piece of matzah, and again, we eat the afikomen. By now, we think we picked up the pattern. And guess what we're doing? We are leaning. And that is the last eating that we're going to do. Once we've eaten the afikomen, a person should not eat anything else that evening until sunrise, until after the Seder. The last taste we should go to sleep in our mouth with is the taste of the afikomen, which is the dessert brought out at the end of the Pesach Seder. But we're not done with the wine yet. We're done with the eating, but we're not done with the drinking. And I want to tell you from personal experience, this is where things start getting tough. Because now we're going to do what we do all the time after eating a bread meal, is we do borech, which is where we bench. We say the grace, after the brachas that are made after a person eats bread. So we are going to take a bencher. It's all actually in the Haggadah. The Birkas HaMazon is printed, and we are going to say the Birkas HaMazon. And at the end of the Birkas HaMazon, we have a cup of wine, and this cup of wine is filled up. And again, we are going to make a Borei Priya Gofen, and we are going to again drink this wine, and again, it is going to be drunk while leaning. Now, There are many people, who actually switch over from wine to grape juice by this point because they just cannot handle any more wine. Again, ideally, if a person drinks a smaller amount, 3.3, 4.42 fluid ounces according to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, 5.07 fluid ounces according to the Chazon Ish and according to people who like drinking wine. But ideally, the entire cup should be drunk out. If one is having trouble with the wine at that point, then one is able to resort to grape juice. After Borech, which is the Birkas Hamazon, we go to step number 13, which is Hallel. Hallel is the praising of God, and we sing the Hallel. But before we do, we fill the cups with the fourth cup. And there is an interesting ritual that there is one very big glass at the table. I don't have one at this table, but let's pretend this is a very big glass, and people fill it up. This is called the Kos Shel Eliyahu, which is the cup of wine that is filled for the prophet Eliyahu, who, according to the Nach, Nach, Eliyahu did not die physical death as we understand it. He ascended to heaven in a fiery chariot, and he can reappear in their stories of Eliyahu Navi in the Talmud, and in later generations of Eliyahu Navi reappearing in various forms to various tzaddikim at various times. On the night of the Seder, we fill a cup for Eliyahu Navi, symbolically, because Eliyahu Navi is the one who's going to be announcing the advent of the Mashiach, who's going to be coming very soon, hopefully. And Eliyahu Navi, we fill a cup for Eliyahu Navi. Then we get up, and there's an interesting tradition. We open the door as we go through the Hallel, because we want to show that this is what's called a Leil Shimurim. Leil Shimurim means that we are protected on this night. This is the night of redemption. This is the night where Hashem's protecting us, watching over us, guarding the Jewish people. So we open the door. One is not allowed to do anything foolhardily because we are being protected, but we can open the door. And there are, once in a while, people hope to hear a knock at the door just at that point as we fill up the cup for Eliyahu Navi. As a matter of fact, in my own home, one night, shortly after, at this point in the Seder, I might have been a little bit right before this point, there's a knock at the door, and there was a strange man there. And, we were going out of our, wow, I guess we merited Eliyahu Navi incognito, and it turned out that it was unfortunately an unstable man who had escaped from a mental institution. But, hopefully this year, the real McCoy will show up. So we open up we open up the door. And then after the Hallel, once again, guess what? Yes, you're on a roll. We are going to have the fourth cup of wine. And yes, once again, we are going to lean. And frankly, by this point of the Seder, sometimes I can't even sit up straight. Anyway, but we are supposed to lean at this point and drink that fourth cup of wine. After the fourth cup of wine, we are basically finished with the Seder, but there's one last step which we announced. Nirtza. Nirtza means that it has been accepted, that we hope that our ritual, the ritual has been accepted and that God is pleased with the way we conducted our Seder. Just a couple of points. Then there's more we say a few more. There are songs that are sung. One of the famous songs is the Chad Gadya, where we talk about the little goat that the father bought, and then the goat was eaten, and then the cat ate the goat, the dog ate the cat, and it leads all the way till we follow this chain up until we reach the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem is the one who overcomes the angel of death. Symbolically, that Hashem is running the show. Everything that happens down here is a ripple effect that leads up ultimately to the cause of all, which is God himself, who is running and supervising everything that happens down here to the nth degree. Now, just a couple of points I would like to make for anybody who is, again, less experienced with a Pesach Seder. First of all, it is advisable not to be starving when you arrive at the Seder, because there are certain Seders that some people move their Seders fairly quickly, but often the Seder could go on for quite a while, and it will be a very long break between the karpas that a person eats as the appetizer, remember at the beginning of the Seder, and eventually the matzah that we eat, which is the first real food that we're eating in night. So it's not a good idea to arrive at the Pesach starving. We shouldn't be too full so that we have the appetite to eat the matzah, Number one, it's not a good idea to start. Number two, there should be no frustration whatsoever. You may see things that you're not familiar with. Feel free to ask. Go there, enjoy the show. If you're in a home where there are a lot of children or there are a lot of guests, you should anticipate a certain amount of tumult, and there may be breaks in the action. It might not go as smoothly because children, kids might be crying and they might be attended to. And, if a mother gets up to take care of a child, so then everybody's going to wait for her. So you sit around at the table, you schmooze a little bit, you talk about, ideally, what leaving Egypt means to us today, and the anything that you can contribute, as I mentioned earlier. But they used to say, or they still say on the airplanes, you get to the Seder, sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. Everybody should have a very wonderful Seder and a Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
Hi, this is Peretz Baruch Eichler, a proud alumnus of Ohr Somayach. Now, what you just watched is one of the many programs that Ohr Somayach provides, leaving its impact on hundreds of thousands, with so many more waiting to be reached. Ohr Somayach's central campus in Jerusalem has over 300 students presently learning there. And now you can be a vital part of spreading that bounty of knowledge worldwide by logging on to donate.ohr.edu. We can step up to the plate at this pivotal moment of Ohr Somayach's growth and bring the next generation of Jews home.